slow way they move.
It's just the movement of them.
They just give you the creeps.
Really slimy.
When you see a snake,
I can't stand the...
that's it, I go the opposite way.
Well, they look nasty.
Slimy creatures to me.
I wouldn't like to go too close to it.
I have this feeling that they will be slimy, slithery.
Horrible, yeah.
They're just
I always think they're going to move so fast, faster than I can move away.
Thou art cursed above all cattle, and above every beast of the field. Upon thy belly shalt thou go, dust shalt thou eat all the days of thy life.
Evil, slinky,
It's just a slithering, isn't it?
Can't imagine.
Oh, it's all slimy.
Our reactions to snakes are still, subconsciously perhaps, influenced by the myths that have surrounded them since prehistory. But if we can look at a snake with an unprejudiced eye, we will discover a most remarkable creature which manages to survive very efficiently in a hostile world. Man has brought devastation to this Welsh cliff top. His scrub burning will kill a great many of the animals that live here. For an adder, freshly emerged from hibernation, the only hope of survival is to move. We use the expression snake in the grass for someone who is traitorous and deceitful. But if we look at the world from the snake's point of view, that surely is a libel. It's early spring. This adder has spent the winter in a communal den below ground. The spring sunshine draws the newly emerged snakes together. These are the strange snake meetings of legend. Up to 100 individuals may assemble in one writhing mass. They're all males. The females are still below ground and won't join the males for another 2 weeks. The adder, or viper, is Britain's only venomous snake and warns of the fact with a V spelt out on its neck. But there's nothing sinister about these gatherings. These cold-blooded reptiles are congregating here for just one reason: warmth. Their bodies became very cold during hibernation. Now they assemble on prime basking sites to absorb the sun's heat and gather enough energy for their first act of the year, the shedding of the skin. The first sign is a clouding of the eye. It's caused by a secretion from glands below the skin, which separates the old, worn-out skin from the new. It's a process that will be repeated several times a year. The skin comes off in one piece, splitting first at the head. As the snake travels through the undergrowth, the old skin catches on plants and stones and begins to peel backwards. This sloughing of the skin helps rid the snake of parasites and allows it to grow. In the past, this habit enhanced the supernatural reputation of snakes. It was interpreted as proof of immortality. The snake never died. It simply shed its skin, leaving behind a ghostly replica of the snake that had worn it. Now the females join the gathering. Their duller markings and larger heads contrast with the smaller males. They will all lie together for several weeks. the gathering becomes increasingly restless. It's around this time of year that strange sights are sometimes seen. Dancing snakes. This was once thought to be a courtship ritual, but in fact these are both males, and they're trying to push one another to the ground. The snakes are battling over the females. Although their movements may become very intense, they never injure or bite each other. At times, their combat can be as graceful as the dancing of legend. Lionel Kellaway, an ex-gamekeeper with a passion for snakes, is now a research student at Swansea University. He's collected these adders in the course of a research program that has already revealed new facts about their behavior. He carries out his studies on a very small area of the Gower Peninsula, inside an enclosure in the grounds of Swansea University.
I've always had a particular soft spot for the adder, and I find its combat one of the most exciting of all reptile behaviours. It occurs during the spring mating period, and I've found that males court in response to a female-produced odour, which also seems to prepare the males for combat. It's the intrusion of another male on these courting couples which appears to trigger the combat behaviour. A combat is a trial of strength, and the stronger, larger males generally become dominant to the weaker and thus get greater access to the available females. Combat bouts are punctuated by brief periods where the movements which seem to maintain it are lost. They seem to be decision points where combatants will either re-engage or combatants will break off. During these combat bouts, the snakes appear oblivious to their surroundings. At the final decision point, the stronger male, the then dominant male, will often chase off the weaker and then return to the female, over which the combat first started. From there, he will recommence courtship with the female and defend her and the available basking site from the attentions of other males.
But what was it that triggered combat between the males? Would they fight with a model snake? By imitating the movements of a real snake, Lionel is able to induce them to fight. The model had to be moving, but were the zigzag markings necessary? Lionel tries the snake again, this time with a handling stick, and still the snake dances. His next experiment seems to prove that the snake responds mainly to movement. It appears to mistake his finger for a rival snake. The fact that Lionel's finger is within easy striking distance shows that even though the adder is venomous, it has no real inclination to harm man. Many of the myths about snakes endow them with a phallic significance and make them the very epitome of sexuality. The truth about their sexual behavior, however, is perhaps even stranger than the legends. Their actual courtship begins as a gentle affair, the male licking the female with rapid flicks of his tongue and passing his body over hers. This may continue for several days, interrupted only by the male fighting off rivals. The courting male waits for the female to respond by raising her tail. He then attempts to mate. This time, he's unsuccessful. He may have to try many times before he succeeds. His sexual organ has two prongs, but only one of them is used at a time. As they're covered with soft spines, once coupled, the male may have trouble freeing himself. Consequently, mating may be very prolonged, lasting up to 4 hours. The female will often move away during this time, dragging the smaller but unresisting male behind her. After mating, the female spends much of her time basking. The eggs stay in her body until they're ready to hatch, and, like a mobile incubator, she keeps them warm by seeking the sunshine, a technique that helps the adder to breed farther north than any other snake. This need for warmth is the main reason that Britain has only 3 kinds of snakes. The ancients believed in a more supernatural reason. They thought that the rowan, the magical tree, destroyed them. Our ignorance of our own British snakes was such that one species remained unrecognised until the end of the last century. Today it survives only on a few heaths in southern England. It's the smooth snake. It's harmless, feeding mainly on lizards. It's sometimes mistaken for an adder, but its slender head lacks the V-shaped mark, and its body has no zigzag. Like the adder, it retains its eggs in its body until they hatch. That snakes lay eggs at all would have surprised our ancestors. They believed in a theory of spontaneous generation, that a fallen horsehair could miraculously turn into a living snake, particularly if it fell into liquid manure. Perhaps the legend grew from finding young snakes around manure heaps, which is where you can often discover our third British snake, the grass snake.
I know, well, like everything else, it's time, isn't it? There are a lot of picking.
Unlike the adder, the grass snake doesn't retain its eggs inside its body. Instead, it depends on these piles of decaying vegetation to provide warmth for their incubation.
Rain help, so it's no problem really in taking the weeds out. In fact, it's difficult not to work sort of how big a top
Many grass snakes will be drawn to the same site, and it's this tendency that brings the harmless grass snake into many a garden. The egg-laying chamber has been created by the bodies of the snakes. Up to 40 may congregate in a large compost heap. They may spend several days within their chamber before egg-laying begins. As many as 50 eggs may be laid by each female. She will then leave them alone in this man-made incubator to be warmed by the heat of decay. The young will hatch out through the parchment-like shell 2 months after they're laid. With many hundreds of eggs laid together, their synchronized hatch may well be the source of tales about snake plagues.
There we are, Piggy. Now you can have your quick slurp.
Is that the one you made?
The young grass snakes will not stray far from their compost heap, and their unwitting human benefactors have provided something else in this garden that suits them very well. And grass snakes that hatched last year are already hunting there.
There we are then, Piggy. Tadpole and...
Lovely tadpole.
And then we
Thank you very
John.
much.
Marjorie, yours.
Thank you, Dennis.
And that's yours.
Smaller than a pencil, this yearling grass snake is watching for signs of its tiny prey.
Very solid.
It will spend many hours hunting the tadpoles. It relies mainly on sight, so the trick is to find the spot in the duckweed where the tadpoles regularly surface for air.
This is quite a large paddock, but there's at least an acre of garden.
But it really does
If catching a tadpole can be a problem for such a little snake, swallowing it certainly isn't any easier.
an hour or two in the afternoon. Yes, fine.
What time are you thinking of going after lunch?
Well, no, I think if we have a coffee with Peggy, we'll go straight on and get ourselves a bite in the pub.
Well, I've got a bit of a bun fight on Wednesday afternoon. Are you going down in Church Road? It's the Women's Institute.
Women's Institute, I didn't get to that. Yes, well, the one on the edge of the pool here, that doesn't,
That one.
the slugs don't seem to come and have a look at it.
The adder hunts away from man. Its forked tongue, in our eyes the symbol of falsehood, is the snake's most trusted organ. It isn't used for stinging, but as a scent collector to carry scent particles in the air back to a tasting organ in its mouth. The snake seems to stare simply because it has no eyelids. It was once thought to be able to hypnotize its prey, but in fact its eyes have poor definition and are sensitive primarily to movement. With these two senses alone, it does its hunting, for a snake has no ears. According to the book of Genesis, its limbs were lost through a curse, but in fact its streamlined shape is an advantage when moving through thick vegetation. It's able to move forward by sending a muscular wave back along its body as it makes contact with the undergrowth. The scales on its underside give it purchase. It's also able to produce smaller muscular ripples to help it along. Snakes are believed to be descended from lizards that took to burrowing and lost their legs. Although most snakes have now returned to the surface, many still go underground to hunt. Here, its loss of limbs and elongated body give it an advantage over most other predators. The adder eats mainly small mammals. Its quarry here is a wood mouse. The adder, without legs, can't move as fast as the mouse, so a chase would be pointless. Another technique is to lie in ambush and wait for a mouse simply to turn up. The mouse has only a few minutes to live. A stab of the fangs has injected venom, which will soon take its effect. The adder is in no hurry. The bite of a healthy mouse can, perhaps surprisingly, kill a snake, so it will wait until the mouse is almost dead before tracking it down by scent. The adder takes its prey head first. Its jaws can dislocate and the surrounding skin stretch to accommodate its victim. Snakes have been known to survive as long as a year on a single meal. But for an active adder, a meal like this lasts about 2 weeks. Late summer. For 4 months, eggs have been developing inside the female. We are about to witness a rare sight, an adder birth. The egg is covered by a transparent membrane. Within the female, protected by her body wall, it has no need of a shell. The young snake ruptures the membrane with its head. 6 to 12 young are born. They struggle for many minutes before they finally release themselves. They are entering a perilous world, easy morsels for many predators. As adults, their main enemy will be man. Persecuted for centuries, the adder has good reason to fear us. But should we fear the adder? A fully grown adult, basking in the sun. It may be motionless, but it's fully alert. Its eyes are acutely sensitive to movement, although it can see sharply only at close range. The snake is relying on sight and scent to warn it of possible danger. Without hearing, the world it perceives is a silent one. A typical end to a typical encounter. The snake avoids man before man has even seen it. It will only bite if trapped or threatened, and although the bite is painful, it practically never causes death. In fact, you're 100 times more likely to be struck by lightning than to be killed by an adder. Late autumn. The adder is returning to the protection of the earth, back into the viper's den. The days are now too cold for the snake to remain active, so it will spend the winter in this small cavern underground. Snakes return here year after year. Protected from frost and away from man, they won't emerge until next spring. Perhaps, as we learn more about their lives, that world to which they return may become a more sympathetic one. A sea snake, not only one of the most poisonous animals on Earth, but also one of the most abundant of all reptiles. Not, you would think, very good news for us human beings, but surprisingly, this beautiful animal might well be of help to us, and more surprisingly still, it hardly ever uses its lethal bite against us. But how is it, you might ask, that snakes have come to be in the sea at all? Well, they have obviously evolved from land snakes, and you can find evidence of that on islands just off the coast of Borneo in Southeast Asia, if, at certain times of the year, you search among the rocks. This is a mating pair of banded sea krites. The smaller one is the male. They have not yet broken their link with the land, for they have to come ashore to lay their eggs. Like their land-living relatives, they still retain overlapping scales on their belly, which enable them to get about on land very well. So they represent an early stage in the evolutionary move of the sea snakes from the land to the sea. And what a challenge that must have been. The adaptations needed to change from life on land to life in the sea are drastic. But the sea snakes eventually managed to develop solutions to all the problems. Mating and egg-laying finished, the banded sea krites return to the sea. And here they hunt. On land, snakes are able to taste the air with their flickering tongues. In the sea, that same sense is also used, and they can detect the taste of their prey while it's still quite a long way away in the water. And this is their favorite food, an eel. They inject their venom through hollow fangs just as land snakes do. But there is one major difference. The sea snake's venom is even more virulent. In fact, it's one of the deadliest substances known. Once bitten, the eel has no chance. This sea snake belongs to a different family, and one that never comes onto land, even to breed. It gives birth to live young and is totally committed to life in the sea. It swims with the same wriggling motion as its ancestors used on land. But to make it effective in water, its body has changed shape. Its tail is flattened like an oar, and there's a kind of keel along its length which helps it to drive through the water in a purposeful way. And the overlapping belly scales, which are no longer needed and might interfere with its streamlining, have been greatly reduced. Breathing obviously required major adjustments, for sea snakes, like all reptiles, breathe air. But they've solved that problem so successfully that they can remain submerged for over 3 hours. A third of their oxygen is absorbed through the skin from the water. But they also breathe air directly. Their nostrils have special valves that shut when the snake dives. The surface air is then stored in one vast lung which stretches almost to the tip of the tail. The salt in seawater is also absorbed into the bodies of any reptiles in the sea. The Galapagos marine iguana gets rid of it through a special gland in its nose. It sneezes it out. The only other marine reptiles beside the iguanas and the sea snakes are the turtles. They too have a similar gland beneath the eyelid and cry very salty tears. So the sea snakes also have had to evolve salt glands. Theirs is beneath the tongue. So, after millions of years of evolution, sea snakes have become effective and successful inhabitants of the sea. Swimming efficiently, breathing without difficulty, and free of salt, they can explore the coral reef with ease. A Murray eel, too big to be eaten. They prefer smaller fish, and they trap them in crevices. This reef in the Philippines at the moment is not very productive, for it's been wrecked by a typhoon, which has reduced the coral to rubble. But surprisingly, there are lots of snakes here. This is a traditional breeding area, and despite the smashed reef, they have nonetheless assembled in thousands to court and mate. Hunting through coral reefs, normally rich with fish, and armed with a lethal bite, you might think that sea snakes had no problems at all. But there is one danger that evolution has not had time to prepare them for. Surely their deadly venom will provide protection against even this predator. But no, Philippine fishermen know how to handle sea snakes. And not just one at a time. The extraordinary thing is that the snakes are so passive, and that despite their deadly bite, they rarely try to defend themselves. But then they are in the hands of an expert. Around just one island in the Philippines in 1971, 200,000 snakes were taken. 10 years later, only 1,000 or so could be found there. Taking breeding groups is obviously a bad policy, and it will be many years before that colony recovers, even if it's allowed to. So, sea snakes are big business. The fishermen themselves only receive a small payment for each snake, but there's a huge markup and lots of middlemen. And in the exclusive fashion shops of the world, sea snake products cost a fortune. It's estimated that in the Philippines alone, 100,000 sea snakes have been taken in a single month. Harvesting natural resources can make sense as long as they're allowed to renew themselves. But it's very doubtful if sea snakes can withstand this kind of plunder for long. From their original home around Borneo, if that's where it was, sea snakes have spread through the Philippines and out into the Pacific. The Great Barrier Reef off the northeast coast of Australia has become a paradise for them. Here they have diversified enormously. 30 out of the world's 50 or so species live here. The olive sea snake is a species well known to local divers. The famous underwater swimmers Ron and Val Taylor describe this species as being like a kitten when gently held behind the neck. This is the biggest of all, called Astrotia, which can reach the thickness of a man's forearm and is strong enough to bite through a quarter-inch wetsuit. But again, they seldom use all this power and poison against man. Only under great provocation will they attack. They only seem to kill for food. But even so, their venom, 10 times as powerful as a cobra's, seems excessively poisonous for such small prey as a reef fish. A few fish, however, can apparently develop some resistance to it, so perhaps the snake has had to increase its toxicity to overcome that resistance. But some fish eat snakes. Only a few species of shark attack snakes. For most of the time, these two major predators steer well clear of one another. species of sea snake have become very specialized feeders. This one has a tiny head, a long, thin neck, and minute fangs which deliver no venom. It searches the sand for buried fish eggs. But the star success of the sea snake world is this one. It's called Pelamis, the yellow-bellied sea snake, and it's the world's most abundant reptile. A twisting, seething mass of one of its relatives was once seen floating in the sea in a belt 9 feet wide and nearly 70 miles long. It's become so specialized and so successful that it spread out from Southeast Asia into the Pacific and expanded its range across it for 9,000 miles to the east. Just how it's achieved this makes a remarkable story. Here and there on the surface of the ocean, the wind and the prevailing currents cast up long lines of floating debris that are called drift lines. There are floating logs, masses of dead weed, rubbish, and detritus of all sorts. But among it all, there's food. Seabirds regularly fly up and down it, looking for what can be found from the air. And below water, the drift line supplies food for Pelamis. There are all sorts of living creatures dwelling among it. Crabs clinging to a coconut, and barnacles hitchhiking on a mangrove shoot that may have been drifting for months. And here is Pelamis. Like everything else, it has become a drifter, floating almost passively among its potential prey. It usually has a yellow belly, but individuals vary, and the older ones are often darker. Its highly variable tail markings may act as a lure to attract prey, and its generally bright black and yellow coloring may serve to warn off predators. It hunts by stealth. It doesn't see very well, but can probably detect movement close up. The tongue helps it to smell out its unsuspecting prey as it wanders into range. Its deadly venom takes a few minutes to act, and the fish is always moved to a head-on position before being swallowed so that its spines don't stick in the snake's throat. This one has missed its strike and has to readjust its jaws. Though hunting seems to be rather random, it obviously works well enough. The success of Pelamis as a species proves that. But they haven't had it all their own way. In the hide-and-seek world of the drift line, some fish are well camouflaged and go unnoticed. They may also feign death to avoid detection. Pelamis itself, however, as it drifts, is treated by other smaller creatures much as they treat a log or anything else. Barnacles settle on the tip of its tail and sit there feeding on plankton. To remove them, or any other surface nuisance, Pelamis does an amazing trick. It's called coiling, and it's a way of rubbing surface against surface, which, when you come to think of it, is not too easy if you're a floating animal far from land. Those sea snakes, like the banded krites that still come ashore to breed, shed their skins every 4 or 5 months. But Pelamis does it as often as every 2 weeks. It's probably an important anti-fouling adaptation, needed in an entirely oceanic existence. So it seems that Pelamis has developed a lifestyle excellently suited to the surface of the Pacific. But does it stay only there? The answer is no. The next question is, why do snakes dive down so often when one might think that there was little or no food to be found deep down? And where exactly do they go? Scientists from the Smithsonian Research Institute in Panama are trying to find out the answers. Working from a rubber boat in the drift lines, they catch plenty of snakes and keep them in tanks in their laboratory on board. By attaching a small transmitter, they hope to track the snake and find out what it is doing and where. A hydrophone picks up the signals from the transmitter as the snake takes it down. How do its lungs and heart cope with the pressure of such deep dives? We still don't know, but it could be that further research will reveal answers and that they will help us understand our own bodies better, particularly in connection with diving. The record depth measured for a diving sea snake was 50 meters, and the maximum time between breaths, 3.5 hours. Why do they do it? We still don't know, but presumably it must be important to them, since some spend up to 99% of their time down below. It's baffling. There are other vessels apart from the research boat working along this drift line. They are fishing for shrimp, and shrimp only. The rest of Pelamis's neighbours are thrown back, which seems a wasteful way of fishing. But it suits the dolphins very well. This fisherman treats the snake with great caution. When washed up on the shore with the other rejects, there is something about a Pelamis which puts off even land dwellers. A vulture is not normally at all fussy. But they don't like snakes. And this one, being black and yellow, seems to carry a particularly strident warning. Nothing, it seems, is too anxious to interfere with Pelamis. But ashore, Pelamis is practically helpless. It has become so specialized for the drifting oceanic life that it has completely lost its ability to move about on land. Such is the price of extreme specialization. pushing against the limits of its range. It can't cross land, and it has expanded across the Pacific as far as is possible in terms of temperature. To the north and the south, it's hemmed in by cooler waters. So where can it go next? There's one chance. The Panama Canal. Here is a connection between the Pacific and the Atlantic Oceans. It's 44 miles long, a thin thread of water across the narrow isthmus linking the North and South American continents. Surely Pelamis could slip through here and then conquer the Atlantic too. But no, this is the obstacle. A strong current as the canal waters fall 70 feet from an inland lake. Pelamis could probably cope with the fresh water in the lake, but the flow and the lock gates are too much. Once again, its passive, specialized lifestyle has reduced its options. But there is still a chance, and trade and politics are the key. There's talk of another sea-level canal being built for economic and strategic reasons, and that might suit Pelamis very well. So stand by the Caribbean, Florida, and Atlantic. Pelamis could be on its way. It's even reckoned that it could survive in the English Channel in summer. Now, there's a thought for you when you go for a swim.